Now, moving away a bit from freedom of information a bit, I'm moving more now into your civic activities that you're both well known for. Why are civic societies not taken seriously in this country? Why is it? I mean, it's something I've always asked. I question myself a lot, even while I was in university and now. Why is it that we have to burn tires in the street or block a road to get notice, Mr. Maraj?
But in some cases, you have to do that. But I don't agree that civic societies are not taken seriously. I think that they are taken seriously, but I think that what has to happen, there have to be, I think there have to be more unity with the civil societies and the civic societies. Quite recently, I started I got a group of young people together, and we started an organization called Democracy Watch. And there has been a lot of interest in it, but it's to get the young people involved to actually do the work, which has become a problem. And I think if we can get the young people involved, to become involved as they were involved in the 1970s and thereabout, I think we can have a very powerful civic society movement in Trinidad and Tobago. But I think you have very good groups in Trinidad and Tobago, very important groups, and I think even the trade unions do a very good job. And there may be a time coming in Trinidad and Tobago where all these groups may have to get together and unite in order to defend democracy and etc. in Trinidad and Tobago. But I think that we need to find some way how we can sensitize the young people of this country, if I may say, with the greatest respect to the younger people like me. But we have to find some ways to sensitize the young people of this country.
Mr. Raymond?
Well, I would agree that the civil society organizations have an important role to play, and they have played an important role. I think about some of the efforts we have made in relation to the Freedom of Information Act, which is JCC, which is a combination of civil society organizations. We have made some progress in relation to procurement law. That is not something we're here to discuss today, but that was a unity of 8 civil society organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, JCC, Transparency, and other organizations like that. So it's possible to make progress on that front. The danger I want to talk about in terms of the civil society, the area that I think we should be alert about, is the whole question about what I would call the whole question of dismantlement. So we have discussed Mr. Maraj's initiative and his energy in getting these important laws passed, and I have always recognized that, and it's good that it was mentioned here. And of course, we're discussing some of our perspectives on it. But one of the things that we must discuss on this sort of occasion is the sort of efforts that have been made in the past to dismantle those gains, and to get a clear understanding in terms of how things go. That when you get something like a Freedom of Information Act, a Judicial Review Act, an Enhanced Integrity Act, a Prevention of Corruption Act in a single administration, that is not an accident. That is a tide in the affairs of men, to use a poetic phrase from the past. That is a particular champion in the cabinet, pushing and insisting and putting it on the agenda and all of those sorts of things that one has to do to get something through in that collective context. And you need to understand also that just as somebody like Ramesh Maraj is visible, or somebody like myself is visible, there are equally powerful or more powerful people who are invisible. Okay? We're discussing an intersection between a world that is seen and a world that is unseen. And the boundary between those two worlds is where we have the contest. We're discussing a world in which the very Freedom of Information Act that we're discussing here, there's been a serious assault on it. And that assault, I would delineate. There's a TSTT case, Magdalena Samaru versus the TSTT. The attorney who litigated for Magdalena Samaru was the former Attorney General, Mr. Anand Logan. And Mrs. Samaru was litigating to get a particular document out of TSTT. She litigated in 2006. Mr. Manning was in power, and so on and so on. This is one of those pieces of litigation like that. And it was alleged, to use a popular phrase, it was alleged that the Integrity Commission had written a letter to the board of directors of TSTT, giving them what in Trinidad and Tobago we call a bly, giving them permission not to follow the law. It was alleged. And the permission was given in the context of TSTT having taken up litigation in 2005, I'll get to that later, against the very Integrity Commission and the remit of the Integrity Commission. So the Integrity Commission, helpfully or otherwise, was alleged to have written a letter to the directors of TSTT. Ms. Magdalena Samaru, whoever she may be, took up the lawsuit with Mr. Ramalogan's assistance. And they won the case. And the turning point in the case, this is where it gets interesting. Eh? This is not me rambling on. It's a very interesting point. The turning point in the case was, what is a public authority? The Freedom of Information Act describes a public authority because the people who are under the umbrella of the Freedom of Information Act are public authorities. What is a public authority? A public authority is something that's under the control of the state and that is funded by the state. Justice Carlton Best, the late Justice Carlton Best, he's passed on now, in that 2008 ruling, ruled that TSTT was a public authority. There's a list of state enterprises in the Ministry of Finance. He found it on the list. Whenever they have to appear before the Joint Select Committee, the minister is there and the permanent secretary. The judge cited all of that in his ruling. And he made the point that TSTT must be a public authority, therefore they must provide the information. Of course, the case went straight off to appeal because, as I said, there's a visible world. This is like astronomy, and there's an invisible world below the surface. People who never show their faces. And I'm coming to a point. It went to the appeal court. Of course, as we know, the partnership won the election, and Mr. Ramalogan became the Attorney General, as Ramesh Maharaj said a little while ago. And another lawyer took over the case for Mrs. Magdalene Samaru. And that case was disposed of. That's the word lawyers use. It was disposed of on the 28th of October 2013 in the appeal court. And the disposal of that case is something that is quite remarkable. So, the judges got together that day, and I obtained the transcript of the hearing because there wasn't a ruling and there wasn't a judgment. But there was a conversation in the appeal court. And it's a transcript that's only 1.5 pages long, and it's truly remarkable. And the judges tell the litigants that, listen, we've read everything, and we understand that you don't want to continue this case. You want to discontinue it, and you want to settle costs out of court, because that is what they do. They compromise the case, which means that they settle the case outside the doors of the court, yes? And the judges then did a remarkable thing. So they agreed that the case wasn't going to go on anymore. They agreed that there was no need for a ruling or a judgment because both parties weren't suing each other anymore. And then the appeal court judge said, and that precedent in Justice Best's ruling, he's speaking to the TSTT. He's speaking to the TSTT attorneys. He said that precedent in Justice Best's ruling that is causing you so much difficulty, we would extinguish it. So the ruling of Best in 2008 that TSTT is a public authority under the remit of the Freedom of Information Act was extinguished by the appeal court in a case where they made no ruling or any judgment. It happened in this country, 28th of October 2013. And what is the importance of all that? Why am I beating up over a small thing like that? Let me tell you why it's important. I'll put it in a bigger context and I'll bring it to today's context. The bigger context is this. The biggest deals in the world, the hugest deals, infrastructure deals, construction projects, commercial deals are being executed today by means of a vehicle, a series of vehicles called public-private partnerships. TSTT is a public-private partnership. We need to get economically and financially literate here. And if TSTT as a public-private partnership, well, we already know the appeal court decided on the 27th of June 2013 that TSTT is not a state enterprise, right? So they're not under the Integrity Act. That was in this country. And the 28th of October 2013, as a follow-up, it's like a 1-2. They extinguished the precedent that was causing them so much difficulty. So in fact, TSTT is not under the Integrity Act, it's not under the Freedom of Information Act. And at this moment, take a stop and consider the bacchanal that's taking place inside TSCT with cable and wireless, and what's happening to our country's telecommunications, and the critical importance of telecommunications to take our society and our economy to the next place. We do not have a window into those conceptions because our Freedom of Information Act has been extinguished. It was a conception that was causing them difficulty, you see. Very helpful. And the Integrity Act was extinguished 27th of June 2013. That's where we're sitting now. So when you see the communication workers beating up on a point, when you see me beating up on a point, and I have a whole tab on my blog about the integrity threat, and the threat the country is facing to our fundamental economic interests. This is no joke, you know. This is very serious. This is about our future. And we have to get this right. That Integrity Act needs to apply to all of those bodies that are publicly funded, even if it's a penny. And more to the point, all of those bodies are transacting public money. So even the bodies, because if you're not careful, let's take a stop. If you're not careful, a little bit again, they will tell you that FCB is not under the Freedom Act. Think about it. Because it makes a profit, so it doesn't take any money from the Treasury. It's only part of the shares owned by the government now, right? Because we own the other part. Okay? So a little bit again, I'm making a sketch for you about the impact and the implications of these things, and to bring it in context in terms of our economic and our financial understanding about our own country's interests. That's what it is at stake here. Okay, it's very, very important. Don't let anybody fool you. I'll never forget those words. He was going to extinguish a president that was causing TSCT so much difficulty. So in fact, the notion that TSCT is a public authority under the Freedom of Information Act has now vanished from our law books. Fortunately, on my website, you would find www.afroraymond.wordpress.com. You would find the Carlton Best Judgment, which is not online in the TT Judiciary website. I had to get a scan of it. Okay? Think what you will. And the transcript of the hearing of the appeal court of the 28th of October 2013, they're both on my website, which is under proper protection, warehoused outside of Trinidad and Tobago, which is part of the information war. Okay?
If I may
Yeah.
just,
Understand that.
It's the reason why I have always said that in any democracy, the judiciary forms an important part. And without the judiciary enforcing the law or properly interpreting the law to give effect to what is stated in the Act or not determine it with the spirit of the legislation can pose a serious problem. And one of the things that we have been educating people about in Trinidad and Tobago is the whole question of Caribbean Court of Justice and Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. Now, I don't want to change the topic, but if you look at the decisions of the Privy Council in politically sensitive matters from the Caribbean, you'll see a different kind of decisions to when you look at judgments from the Caribbean in the various courts of appeal. So you could have the best law in the country, but it's very important for democracy, for the judiciary to be able to discharge its functions. Because if at any time in any country a judiciary becomes a part of the government, then you do not have any democracy.